Good afternoon. Welcome to IDIS in 90 minutes, Public Facilities, Public Services, and Economic Development. Today's presenter is
Bill Kubel.
This webinar will review how to correctly set up and report on Cdbg-funded activities in IDIS. We'd like to take a few moments to go over some guidelines for participating in the webinar. The call will last approximately 90 minutes. All callers are muted due to the high number of participants. The webinar will be recorded for future use and made available for viewing and downloading on the ComCon website. If you are having audio difficulties, you may want to use your telephone instead of your computer. If you have questions, you are welcome to submit them throughout the presentation using the questions function on the GoToWebinar toolbar. Submit your questions by keying them in the text box under the questions pane on the toolbar. Our presenter, Bill, will answer some questions during the webinar. Others will be answered in a new FAQ document posted to the website, http://www.comcon.org/programs/IDIS.html. I'm now going to turn the presentation over to Bill.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Hope you can hear me. If not, just go ahead and put something in the chat box and let me know. I want to thank you for joining us. Looking at the participant list, we can see that we have people from 4 corners of the country. We have lots of states, a lot of folks from city of New Orleans, from Washington to San Diego, to Maine to actually Puerto Rico. So we're glad to have you here. We know IDIS may sometimes feel like just a data entry exercise, but the IDIS system is a really powerful tool for HUD and yourself to use to showcase the accomplishments and benefits and outcomes of the Cdbg program. So we're glad you're here, and we just want to make sure that we use IDIS to provide accurate, complete, and timely data. So today we're going to focus in on public facilities, public services, and economic development. Let's go to the next slide. If you haven't had a chance, these slides are posted to the ComCon website. If not, afterwards you can download them, and we'll also be posting a copy of this video and this recording up to that website as well. And I'll go ahead and walk you through how to get to that website. In terms of our agenda, we're going to cover what's new real quick, both in the system and some new neat resources we have for you in terms of learning and using IDIS. We'll quickly go over some concepts for some of the folks who may be new to IDIS, and then we're going to cover entering data for IDIS public facilities, public services, and economic development. And when we do so, we're really going to be looking at these specific national objectives, because it's not just the eligible activity that affects the data you need to collect, but it's also the national objective. So when we talk about facilities, we'll be talking about low mod area national objective. When we do public services, we'll talk about limited clientele or LMC national objective. And dealing with economic development, we'll talk about low mod jobs or LMJ. Once we go through the data entry exercises, hopefully we'll have some time left over at the end for some questions and answers. But again, don't feel like you need to wait to the end to post any questions. As Donna said, you can post those questions throughout the webinar using that questions feature. We do have quite a few of you on the phone today, and on the webinar, it looks like we're up to close to almost 500. So if I do not get a chance to answer your question during the webinar, we will get it, and we will try to follow up. If not today, then perhaps tomorrow. So sit tight and wait for those responses. So what's new in terms of resources? One neat thing we're working on is some detailed video walkthroughs. Basically, if you've been to the 2-day training, we cover a lot of material. We're going to basically take that 2-day training and break it into different modules that you can actually watch on the website. So those are going to be posted hopefully by mid-September. That's our goal, is to get all that information up on this ComCon website. Currently, all of the materials from that 2-day training is there. So here's the link. If I click on it, this is what it looks like. This is where you'll also see the materials for the webinars. If you want to come over here real quick and download the slides for today's or for yesterday's webinar, or for next week's webinar, we have those materials here. And then at the bottom down here, we have the materials actually from the 2010 trainings we did. So if you went to those 2-day trainings, this is basically what you got. If you missed them, here's your chance to download those materials. And again, this is where we'll post that video as well. There's 3 other webinars. We did one yesterday on housing, so if you missed it, we plan on posting a recording of that webinar to that website I just showed you, hopefully by the end of this week, and then a closed caption will come up, well, let's just say the end of next week. That's a more safe bet. We have 2 more webinars next week. I believe it's Wednesday and Thursday. One on common mistakes grantees often make when reporting CDBG data, and one specifically on CDBG reports and IDIS. So we hope you can join us for those as well. So what's new in the system? There are some new code enforcement screens, and well, one other thing I should mention is we're going to be putting up some FAQs on that website, and one of the FAQs will deal with code enforcement and the new metrics you need to measure for code enforcement. And then thinking more long-term, we have in April of 2012, IDIS is going to be expanded to include some elements of the consolidated plan and the action plan. So what this is going to do is kind of try to tie the whole process together and connect some of that consolidated planning to the activities and outcomes you're already entering into IDIS. If you want more detail, there was another webinar that was done in July, and that's already posted to the ComCon website. Let me just quickly show you how to get to that. If you click on this link or just go to comcon.org, that takes you to the front page. And then over to the left, you will see a box specifically for those ConPlan trainings and a link to the webinars. So those are already posted. Go ahead and watch those. Some really interesting and neat things they're doing there. So I highly encourage you to watch that if you missed it. So let's get into the IDIS section quickly. If you're new to IDIS, what is it? IDIS stands for Integrated Disbursement and Information System. It's an online database. You log in anywhere you have an internet connection, and it's real time. So as soon as you provide some data, HUD will be able to go into IDIS and look at it. The program supports multiple programs, including CDBG, CDBGR, which is recovery, Home, ESG, and HOPWA. There's really 2 purposes to IDIS. Number 1 is it provides you a method to access your funds that are stored in your line of credit. So HUD gives you a grant. They keep that money at Treasury until you need it, and you use IDIS to send that pay request or that drawdown request. Number 2, which is the reason we're here, is you need to be able to tell HUD how you use those funds. How did those funds meet a national objective? How are they used for an eligible activity? So it's used to collect accomplishment and compliance data. And that's really what we're here to do. We want to learn how to report in an accurate manner, in a timely manner, in a complete manner. So what is an IDIS activity? It is essentially the basic building block of IDIS. It's where you're going to report all of your beneficiary data, all your compliance data, and it's the level at which you're going to submit a drawdown. When we're talking about public facilities, an IDIS activity typically represents one facility or one infrastructure project that you're rehabbing or building. For public services, it represents one program, so one job training program, one child care program, what have you. And for economic development, when you're providing assistance to for-profits, direct assistance to for-profits, it's really one loan. So one loan, you're going to have a separate IDIS activity for each loan that you give to a business. If you give out 10 loans in the course of a program year, you'd have 10 IDIS activities. And we'll cover this as we go through the data entry exercises. we're going to talk about both setting up activities, getting off to the right start, and also how and when to report accomplishments for those activities. So in terms of setting up the activity and starting out correctly, number one is you need to define the correct scope of the activity. So for example, I was talking about economic development. You can't just have one activity that represents your whole economic development program. You'd want a separate activity for each loan. So that's one example of defining the proper scope of an activity. Two other key fields that you need to be aware of and be aware that they affect the data that IDIS is going to ask you to collect is the matrix code and the national objective. The matrix code is how HUD gauges the eligibility of the activity. And if you're unfamiliar with your matrix codes, I'd highly encourage you to look in that training manual that's posted to the website, specifically Appendix A. It's going to list all of your matrix codes and provide a short little definition on each. Whenever you're setting up information in IDIS, it's always very important to use the most specific matrix codes. There are two generic matrix codes, one for public facilities, one for public services we'll talk about. But it's very important not to use those, not to rely on those. HUD wants you to use those only as a last resort. So we'll talk about that. Also, we need to select the national objective. And again, the matrix code national objective you select is going to tell HUD, or tell IDIS, I should say, different screens to show you. And so the system's going to ask you for different data based on the matrix code national objective you select. It's really important to get those correct. Okay, so let's talk about public facilities and infrastructure, and specifically those that meet low mod area national objective. So we said matrix codes are very important. Here's the beginning of a list of all the different public facilities and infrastructure in IDIS, and you can see the matrix codes over here to the left, anything from senior centers to handicap, homeless facilities, whole big long list. Again, I encourage you to look at Appendix A for the complete list. Here's the rest. And you see that each one has the specific letter code. So streets is, for example, O3K, and sidewalks is O3L. And then we have this catch-all down here of O3 other public facilities improvements. So what HUD wants you to really do is try to categorize your activities into these more specific codes. And if it doesn't fit anywhere in there, go ahead and use this O3 as a last resort. Okay, in terms of national objectives, public facilities, they're not always low mod area activities, but typically, and that's probably the most common use. They can also meet a limited clientele national objective if you're building or rehabbing a facility for persons with special needs, for example, maybe a homeless shelter or a handicapped center. Some improvements may fit in with SBA, which is slum blight area, or low mod jobs national objectives. But in today's example, we are going to cover the low mod area benefit. So when you're doing a low mod area benefit, if you're meeting that national objective, two things to keep in mind is the area must be primarily residential. HUD doesn't want you to do too many activities, well, no activities in the central business district using a low mod area benefit. It has to be primarily residential area. And the activity must benefit all residents of the area. So you really can do a program targeted at seniors and use the low mod area benefit, because it would just benefit seniors and not all of the residents of the area. So just some things to keep in mind when using that low mod area benefit. Again, use the most specific O3 matrix code. Avoid combining different public facilities under one activity. Chances are, if you're assisting 3 different public facilities in the course of a year, chances are they're going to be under 3 different matrix codes. If not, they may be at 3 different locations, and HUD would want to see that location information by having 3 different activities. Be sure to report performance measures when the activity completes or realizes the benefits. So let's say we're actually going to walk through a street improvements activity in today's example, and typically street improvements, they can last 2 or 3 years, where the benefit is not, the community does not realize that benefit until the 2nd or 3rd year. So it's perfectly fine to leave that activity open at the end of the 1st year, provide a narrative, and not report those beneficiaries until the 2nd or 3rd year. So we'll see how that plays out when we do the data entry. Strive to report unduplicated persons. So if you serve the same person more than once, just count that person once. This plays out more in public services, but we'll walk through that example as well. And finally, when reporting persons for LMA, for low mod area, most of you out there are probably going to be using census data. And you'll see that the system will calculate how many people live in that census area. And you can just go ahead and take that number and use it as your goal. Same thing for states. A lot of states out there will be using survey data. And if you're using the survey data, you know how many people are in that total target area. I guess the key point is not just to count the low mod people in the service area, but to capture the universe or the total population living in that service area. Okay, so enough talk. Let's go ahead and look at the system. We're going to do a data entry exercise. We have a couple bullets here where we can take our choice. I don't think we're going to have time to do all of these, so let's go ahead. We'll do the first one, the street improvement projects. In our action plan, it says we have 2 target areas, one in Maywood and one on 3rd Street. If that was the case and these are non-contiguous area, we would probably want to have 2 separate IDIS activities, one for Maywood and one for 3rd Street. And that way, when you fill in that low mod area data, you'll be able to show to HUD that each area meets that low mod area threshold. Okay, we're going to assume that all the bidding and pre-construction work is done in the first year, and then the construction is not going to be complete until the 2nd year. And then finally, if we have time, I don't think we will, but if you have any questions about architectural barrier removal, go ahead and send me a question. Maybe we can talk about that as part of the question and answers. So let's go ahead and switch back to IDIS. Let's see if I'm kicked out yet. Nope. I'm still in there. So, oh, look at that. Session timeout. We're going to continue today under projects activities. If you have questions about funding and drawdown, again, you can submit them. I don't know if I'll have time to answer them, but we can answer them offline, of course. We're going to assume we're at the very beginning of the year, so we're going to go to Add Activity to add a brand new activity. We're going to assume that somebody was nice enough to add those projects for us. We're just going to focus on the data at the activity level. And I want to thank the good folks in Haverhill. Joanne, if you're out there, hello. We're going to borrow your data set. Just a quick note, I'm not entering real data for Haverhill here. I'm entering data in the UAT. So if you need to practice, if you're brand new to the system and you want to get some hands-on practice, what you want to do is call the IDIS Help Desk and request access to the UAT region. And basically, it looks just like your real data, but you can play around, you can delete everything, you can draw down $1 million, and it won't affect your real data. It gives you a chance to practice. So if you need help getting into that UAT, just let me know. First things first, when we select an activity, is to add a program year. So I click on the drop-down for program year, choose 2011. When I do so, the drop-down for my project list here is going to be limited to the projects for 2011. I'm doing a public improvement and facility, so this looks good. And I think we said 3rd Street public improvements. What you want to do here is have a name that makes sense not only to you, but also that is somewhat descriptive for anybody who's going to read your caper, because the activity name does show up in your caper reports, and we want to make sure that this data is somewhat accessible to the people reading that caper report. Grantee PJ activity ID, you can see that this field is optional. It doesn't have the required asterisks, but a lot of people do use this, even though HUD does not require it, to go ahead and put in a local purchase order number or account number that's going to help them reconcile the IDIS data back to their own data. The next field is very important. It's the activity category, better known as the matrix code. So again, we have this big long list of matrix codes. All the facilities and infrastructures are going to be under 03. And in this case, we're doing the street improvements, so I'm going to choose 03K. That's the best fit, the most specific fit. Okay. Environmental assessment, I'm going to go ahead and say it's completed. And here's the description. Again, you can see it doesn't have an asterisk to show it's required, but it's really important to put that in there because it will help your CPD representative understand and the people reading your caper understand what these funds are being used and how they're being used to benefit your community. Just for today's sake, I'm just going to leave it a little short. And let's go ahead and save the screen. Once we save this first screen, you'll see that the system assigns it an IDIS activity ID. This is a good number to write down anytime you want to do drawdowns against the funds or fund the activity or update the activity. This ID will help you find this activity in the system. You can see that the system added an activity status date or completion date and activity status. We're not going to change those until we come back to update the activity. Our next step is to really come in and complete the setup detail. Essentially, once we're done setting up, our next step will be to fund the activity. If we look right here in the row for Cdbg, it says ready to fund no. And it's going to continue to say no until we provide enough information under the setup detail to satisfy HUD. So let's do that. We'll click on Add Cdbg. And the first thing we see is HUD puts the matrix code in big, bold letters up here. That's basically telling us that a lot of the information on this screen and the next is going to be based on the matrix code and, to a degree, the national objective we select. So if we take a look at our national objective, we see a whole long list. I'm going to choose LMA. And when I do that, based on my matrix code selection and my national objective selection, it's going to limit me under my next field. I'm going to just scroll down a little bit here under accomplishment type and say, oh, I have to choose people. Okay? So I can't measure feet of streets or anything like that. They want to know how many people are living in that target area that are going to benefit from these streets. There is this neat lookup table here, and it will kind of provide that same information what the system just did. It says based on the matrix code, if I click on lookup table, it says based on the matrix code and national objective, these are the accomplishment types I can use. If you have a copy of those training materials, this is actually Appendix C. This table is Appendix C in those training materials. Let's go through the exercise one more time. We're going to start with our matrix code. We'll go down to O3K, which is street improvements. Then we look to the second column, and you can see all these different national objectives that we could use. In our case, LMA is the best fit. So based on this matrix code and this national objective, this is the accomplishment type we want to use. Okay, so it's a very handy table. Make sure you use it, or you can just kind of follow the guides as the system guides through and limit to your choices. Program year. Okay, so in our scenario, we said we don't think we're going to get anything done in 2011. So 2011, proposed count might be 0, but I can add another year here and say I think all of those accomplishments, it may not like the 0. I don't know. We'll find out. Okay, it likes the 0. I think the streets are actually going to be done in 2012. And in my target area, I believe, I did this a little earlier, I think there's about 3,905 people there. And that's based on the number of people who live in my target area based on census data. So HUD, that's what they want to see. They want to see, based on census or survey data, what's the total population who's going to benefit from those street improvements. The next section is performance objective and outcome. So I scroll down my screen a little bit. If you don't know what to choose here, I would refer to your action plan. There's really no wrong answer here as long as you have a rationale for selecting what you're doing. I'm going to choose suitable living environments and sustainability. The next field is address. And HUD really doesn't want to know the address of your public works department who's doing the street improvements. They want to know what area of your community is benefiting from this investment of Cdbg funds. So I'm going to say 500 block of 3rd Street. So that gives an indication of what area is receiving a benefit from these Cdbg funds. Up in the city, I can throw in Haverhill, select the state and the zip code, and hit validate this address. You have to hit this validate this address field. Sometimes the system will find it and it will provide some links up here to, it'll even be able to locate it on a Google map and provide you some information about the census tract it's in. Right now, you can see that my choice, it wasn't able to basically geocode this address, so it's giving me a no matching address message. And that's fine. If you can't find that address, what we want to do is click on this box down here, this skip validation for now. I'll validate this address later. And sometimes, I can't promise you that the system is going to find all of your addresses. Try to get accurate addresses in there whenever you can, though. Scrolling down, The next section is just yes or no questions based on the purpose of the activity. So if they apply, go ahead and click on yes. If they don't, we're going to leave them at the default no. In this case, my street improvement project isn't going to address any of these target populations. I'm going to leave them all at no. This next section over here, not too common to use with public facilities and infrastructure, but it says, will accomplishments for this activity be reported under another activity? This is usually used for program delivery of economic development or a housing program. Some people do use this if they have a public facilities that's funded out of more than one action plan. Maybe you set up the same street improvements in 2009, 10, and 11. And what grantees would do is set up 3 separate activities, one for each funding source, and then only report the accomplishments under one of those 3 activities. For the other 2, they would answer yes here, and then indicate the number, the activity number for the activity that's actually capturing that data. A cleaner way to do that would probably just keep that original activity from the first year funding and increase the funding for that activity. So instead of having an activity for each program year that it's funded, just have one activity that basically consolidates and aggregates all the funding for that activity, for that same scope of work, I should say. So again, it's not too common to use for public facilities. Scrolling down, the next section is organization carrying out the activity. Is the activity being carried out by the grantee? If you answer yes to this question, we're also going to answer this drop-down. And in this case, we may say yes, it's a combination of grantee employees and contractors. If we say no, it's not being carried out by the grantee, what will happen is these fields down here will be active, and this one will be grayed out. This is more common for public services. So for our street improvements, let's leave this as yes and do grantee employees and contractors. Target area. Okay, so we have 3 different types of target areas. Most of you will not have a CDFI. That's Community Development Financial Institution, very few and far between. More common are the local target areas. These are defined by the grantee. I would advise you to take a look at your action plan. Your action plan should have an area where it talks about your geographic priorities, or maybe your con plan that talks about the geographic priorities of your funding. And there's no real, litmus test or threshold for this. If you're investing, if you identify an area and say we want to provide a coordinated approach to making this area better, I would go ahead and consider that a target area. Take note, though, not every single Lomond area activity you do doesn't necessarily equate to a target area. Okay. The third choice here is strategy area, which refers to an NRSA, which is a neighborhood revitalization strategy area. Now, these are actually HUD approved, that you have to get approved through your con plan or action plan, and they actually provide some regulatory benefits, some special things you can do. For today's point, I'm just going to go ahead and illustrate how to add a target area. I'll do local target area, and then it gives me a list of all the target areas that have already been added. I'm just going to click on New. And you can see it's very easy. It's just a matter of saying, yeah, I want to add a new one. And I'll go ahead and call it 3rd Street target area. Whoops. I'll just call it 3rd Street. It will ask you for what type of revitalization effort you're carrying out. A lot of you guys do comprehensive, so I'll go ahead and do that and hit Save. When I do that, you can see it's added to the list. And it's not added just to the system just for this activity. Any other activity I do in this target area, I won't have to add this target area again. I'll just go ahead and be able to choose it from this drop-down. So this drop-down, 3rd Street, will appear for all of my activities moving forward. Okay, moving on. The next section, as I scroll down, is special characteristics. And I'm just going to check if they apply. You can refer to that training manual for more further definition of each one of these. If I do check brownfield, you'll see that I'll be asked how many acres are being remediated in that brownfield redevelopment area. For this case, I'll just say no. And this final box down here refers to other regulatory requirements that may or may not apply. So you just check if they do apply. If they don't apply, you're going to leave them blank. So one-for-one replacement and displacement, if those occur due to this CDBG funded activity, what you'll see is when I check these, when I go to complete my activity, when I go to report accomplishments, the system is going to show me a narrative for each one of those saying, okay, well, what did you do to mitigate the displacement, and what did you do to address your one-for-one compliance requirements? You can see that the system has some intelligence built in here. It says favorite activity, which is an economic development issue. It's not allowing me to check that box. So the system knows since I did a street improvements activity, this wouldn't apply. The others are special assessment, which may or may not apply, revolving fund and float funded. If you check float funded, the system's going to ask you to provide this information down here. Not too common for public facilities and infrastructure are revolving loan fund or float funded. Special assessment, a lot of states do that, so just go ahead and all you have to do is check it and you're done. It really doesn't ask for any more information other than that. So we're done with page 1. We completed all the required fields and everything that applied, and now we have 2 choices at the bottom. We have save and continue. Anytime you're presented these 2 options, you want to click on save and continue. If I click on save, it's going to take me back to that first page, but I didn't complete enough of the setup information to be able to fund this activity. So I'm going to keep going. I'm going to click on save and continue, and I'm going to finish setting up this activity because I want to be able to fund it. The next screen, again, based on the matrix code national objective selected, since I selected LMA, it's saying, well, how are you going to qualify this as an LMA activity? Am I going to use pre-populated census data that's available in the system, or did I go out and do a survey? So based on your choice here, the next screen is going to ask you for some additional information. I'm going to stick with census, as that's what most of you out there use. Scrolling down, the next section is basically your budget and any leveraged funds that you're going to be able to acquire or add to the system. Notice that these fields are not required, okay? That's because some CDBG activities out there are fully funded with CDBG, and these would not apply. But in most cases, especially with facilities and infrastructure, you're able to leverage other dollars with your CDBG investment. And it's very important to provide that information here because the CDBG program as a whole is graded and evaluated based on its ability to leverage funds. And HUD really relies on this section right here to get at that information and to show that it's able to leverage additional dollars. So while some of yours may be fully funded out of CDBG, I think there's a lot of projects and activities out there that are getting other funds that are not being entered into the system. So even if it's an estimate, remember we're entering this data at the setup. If you have that additional information, even if it's just an estimate, HUD really wants you to put it in there. So I'm just going to go ahead and throw in some numbers here for the sake of our case study. When we do that, one more point up here is notice if I come back up to the CDBG row, notice that that dollar amount is grayed out. Don't worry about providing the CDBG number because the system will actually populate this for us once we do a drawdown. It will also, if I scroll down a bit, calculate a leveraging ratio. It will say for every dollar of CDBG spent, we were able to leverage this much in additional funding. So again, very important. The system is not going to require you to input that information, but it's really going to make the program look better if you do enter this information. Okay, moving on to the next section is grant and loan assistance. It says enter the number of grants or loans provided to the beneficiaries of this activity. In our case, basically we're not providing any grants or loans to people or businesses or anybody. We're just using all that money internally to hire contractors to fix the street. So all this is going to be 0. We can leave this blank. Again, at the bottom, we see some choices, save, save and previous, and save and continue. I want to do save and continue. Okay, more data. We're almost done with setup, I promise. All right, so we come down here, and this is a bit tricky, folks. A lot of people, when they first see this, they're not sure how to proceed. But what we want to do is first choose which county by code the project is located in. And most of you, other than states, are just going to see one option here. These county codes here are FIPS codes, so if you're not sure which code to choose, you can do a quick Google search for FIPS code, which is a federal identifier code, FIPS code, and you should be able to identify what these are. If you happen to have a target area that is across an entire city or county, you can go ahead and check this. But most cases, you're actually going to have to specify first the county, and then we have to specify also the census tract and the block groups. So there's no place where I can, nothing to click here yet. What I have to first do is once I choose my county code, I come up here and I hit Save Page. Watch what happens when I hit Save Page. Once I hit Save Page, all of a sudden I have this little radio button under Add Edit Census Tracts. I can click that and then click on the Add Edit Census Tract button. And this is going to take me to another page where I can choose my census tract. What it's going to do is it's going to list all of my available census tracts for this selected county. I'm just going to choose the first one for today's case and click the Select button. What that does is move it from the available census tract to the selected census tract. Not done yet, not out of the woods yet. Now I have to choose the block groups for this census tract. And again, if you had multiple census tracts, you could do multiple. I'll just do a couple so I can demonstrate. You can always highlight additional census tracts by holding down your Control key. But I have these two census tracts. I'll click on Select Block Groups, and it's going to take me to my last page where I can indicate which block groups in those census tracts are being served. In this case, I'm going to check all for my 2601. Then I have to hit Save, and I'm not done yet. I don't want to just go straight to funding. I want to go to Save and Return to Previous Page to back up one page, and then back up one more time by hitting Save and Return to Previous Page. And finally, all right, the moment of truth here. Down here in this bottom section of page 3, I'm on page 3 again because I backed up a couple times. Down here, if I click Calculate % Low Mod, it's going to populate those numbers for me. And what I want to see is a % low mod above 51%. Some of you are considered exception communities and can go below 51%, but for most of us out there, it's going to give us, we want to be above that 51%, and then we'll be able to fund the activity. It's also going to give us the total number of low and moderate income persons in that target area, in that census tract and block group we selected, and the total population for that. And this right here, my friends, that is the number we're going to be using as our proposed and actual goal, okay? Our proposed goal and our actual accomplishments. So once we're done with the street, we're going to report that 3,905 persons benefited from this activity, okay? And it says ready to fund here. What I've seen is, if you go to fund it right now, even though it says ready to fund right here, I still like to be careful. I still like to click on the Save button right here and go back to the first page. And see ready to fund here. And also, it's a nice little feature is once it says ready to fund here, you should see a little shortcut button if you scroll down below that activity category table. You should see a little shortcut button, and if I click on that, it will take me to activity funding for that specific activity, which is a nice little shortcut. All right, let me see if I have a few more slides here for activity completion. I don't. So we're going to go straight into activity completion. So that was set up. That's the data you have to provide at the beginning of the year, the beginning of the activity. And the system, IDIS Online, does a nice job of separating out the data you need to provide for setup and that you need to provide at the end of the year for accomplishments, okay? So again, back in our case study, we said this street improvements project, it's going to take a couple of years to get done. In the first year, we're really just going to do some pre-development. Maybe we're going to hire the contractor, do the environmental, and that's going to take an entire year. We're working a little slow. So at the end of the first year, we have nothing to accomplish or nothing to report, but you still want to go in and add accomplishments. You want to report at least at a minimum on an annual basis for each open activity. So even though we're not going to report that people were assisted, I'm still going to come in here and add an accomplishment year for 2011 and add a narrative. And my narrative may just say streets are still under construction. Maybe all pre-development work completed. And what you want to do is really work with your CPD representative. They're the person who is going to be reading this narrative as part of your caper. So you may want to work with them to find out what level of detail and data do they want in this accomplishments narrative. It's especially helpful. Let's say all of our money was used on maybe the architectural and engineering costs for the street. All that money was spent way up front, but we don't have any benefits to report. So that's a case where the CPD rep wants to see an explanation of, okay, you spent the money, where are you at in terms of status with this project? So use that narrative to do that and work with your rep to find out how much data they want in there. You can see that this section is left blank. Once I save this, this is just the first page. Let's go ahead and hit save and continue to get to the second page. And what you're going to see here are performance measures on the second page. What it's doing is it's carrying forward that number. Anybody recognize that 3905? That was the total population of the census tract and block group I selected. It's saying, of those people, how many will receive new access to the public facility or infrastructure? How many will receive improved access? Or how many will receive access to the facility or infrastructure that is no longer substandard? Since I'm not done with the street yet, nobody's really realized the benefit, I'm actually going to leave all of these blank for this specific year, for 2011. Okay? So if I did that and hit save, at the end of my 2011 program year, I would go ahead and leave my activity status as open. So let's flash forward, maybe halfway through 2012, the street is finally finished. I want to go into IDIS. I'm going to click on Edit Cdbg Accomplishments. And now that I'm in my 2012 year, I don't want to come down here and just add to this narrative. I don't want to say, oh, there's extra space here. I can just add to this narrative because this is the information that's tied to 2011. What I need to do is use this button up here, Add New Accomplishment here. And if I click on that button, you can see I get basically a new set of this screen and the next screen where I can report on everything that was done in 2012, where I could just say, just for today, let's say project complete, 3,905 persons will benefit from okay. Again, you'd want to talk to your rep about putting in some more detail here, but for today's purpose, that will do. Again, I hit save and continue. And now that the street is complete, people are out there using it and playing with it, I can go ahead and report this. And in this case, I'm going to assume the street was substandard and that is no longer so. It's nice now and everybody's using it and happy. So I'm going to report 3,905 right here. Don't feel the need that you have to somehow splice that total number between these three categories. Typically, you're going to find one category that makes the most sense and just throw everybody in there. Okay. At that point, at the end of 2012, I hit save. And now, if the activity is complete, and when I mean complete, I mean that no more drawdowns are going to be processed and that all the benefits and accomplishments that you need to collect and report to HUD have been entered into the system. At that point, I could go ahead and click on activity status, change that to completed. If you ever have an activity that doesn't end up spending money or doesn't meet a national objective, what you'll do is you'll change it to canceled. In this case, we did it, so we're going to do complete, and you would throw in a completion date. Now, before the system will let me do this, if I scroll over to the right a bit, I'm going to scroll over to the right to the right of that accomplishments button, I'm going to see another button called Check Cdbg. I want to hit that, and what that's going to do is the system is going to tell me if I have any errors, if it found anything that I still need to do before I mark this as complete. So it says my activity pathway is complete. That's good. I've provided all my data, but as you probably noticed, I didn't do any draws against this activity, and I didn't change the activity completion date. I did everything on the same day. So these two errors you probably won't see when you actually go in and do this this exercise for real, because you're not going to be completing the activity on the same day that you set it up, and you're actually going to have drawn money. So, but that's the process for public facilities. So I know I went through that pretty quick. We said this is going to be IDIS in 90 minutes. So if you do have any questions, please submit them through that, that questions feature in the webinar, and I'll go ahead and try to answer them as I go through this and maybe at the end. And again, if we can't get to your questions, please go ahead and submit them anyways, and we'll try to answer them offline either tonight or tomorrow. All right, so let's move on to, let's go ahead and move on to public service activities. And we're not just going to talk about public services, but we're also going to talk about activities that satisfy the limited clientele, or LMC, national objective. Okay, so starting off, we're going to take a look at all the different public service matrix codes. You can see, looking over here to the left, that most of them start with 05. So 05A, B, C, D. For some reason, operating cost of homeless programs, it got stuck with 03T. Even though it's in the 03 series, you'll see that the system considers that to be a public service matrix code. One thing I do want to point out are there are some new matrix codes. There's actually two more here. We have 05U, which is housing counseling. There's two others, which is 05V and 05W for food banks and I believe neighborhood cleanups. And again, so HUD is able to expand this list, as they see fit for new specific codes. But again, just like with public services or public facilities, you want to choose the most specific code applicable and only use 05 as a last resort. So if you can't fit it into any of these other categories, go ahead and use 05. But chances are you're going to be able to find a more specific code than just 05. Okay, so those are the matrix codes. This is the national objective. A lot of public services out there, and we're going to use this as our example, is going to meet the limited clientele national objective. So this is when a program or service is limited to a specific group of people or a particular type of subpopulation of the general population, such as presumed benefit. HUD has a listing of subpopulations that it assumes that if you serve, you don't actually have to collect income verification for. For example, and we're going to see a list actually on the next slide, I think, but elderly, homeless persons, for example, if you run those types of programs, HUD can safely assume that at least 51% of those people are low mod, and you won't actually have to verify that income. Where that will affect you, though, is when you enter data into IDIS, it still asks you to break it out between extremely low, low, and moderate. So we're going to see how that plays out. Some public service activities can meet a low mod area national objective. Again, the service must be available to all the residents in the area. Some examples are crime prevention public services or maybe a graffiti removal. Those are both good examples of low mod area public service activities. And then some public services may meet urgent need or a slum blight area national objective. Again, today we are going to highlight the limited clientele national objective just because that's the most common amongst grantees out there. Okay, so I briefly mentioned public benefit categories. These are they listed over here to the left. And again, since you're not collecting income data for these types of activities, HUD has said, we don't want you to just report everybody at moderate. And actually that was a problem for a while. If you were doing a presumed benefit, people were just throwing everybody under moderate because they didn't know which category to use. HUD has said, go ahead and use these assumptions. If you're doing, for example, a homeless public service and you serve 100 people, HUD wants you to report all 100 people as extremely low income. If you do a project, for example, for migrant farm workers, you would report everybody who's assisted under that program as low income. And this way, HUD has some better breakout of the extremely low, low, and moderate data. You can see for elderly, if it's based, if the service is based out of a senior center, or if you're funding a senior center, to count everybody served as moderate income, and if it's not center-based, go ahead and count everybody as low income. So go ahead and use these assumptions. This is also in the manual. I believe it's on page 10-6. So if you don't want to look it up in the slides, it's also in the manual. Some key points for public services: use the most specific code. Again, try to avoid using that 05 generic code. Again, break out income, your beneficiaries by income categories. Don't throw everybody just as moderate income, as this misrepresents CDBG beneficiaries, and it distorts the summaries that HUD provides to Congress and the higher-ups. Just like with public facilities, if you realize benefits over more than 1 year, I know there's some grantees out there, they may have a public service activity that straddles more than one program year. So if you have some beneficiaries in 2011 and some in 2012, you want to use that add a new accomplishment year feature in the accomplishment section to report benefits in both years. And again, you want to strive to report unduplicated persons served. So in our example, let's say we're doing a Meals on Wheels program, and we're going to fund, they plan on serving 50 homebound seniors. Well, those homebound seniors, they may get served once a week. So the duplicated count would be 50 seniors times 50 weeks, which would be 2,500 units of service. HUD doesn't want that 2,500 number. They just want the unduplicated count, which would be the 50 seniors. Okay, you only want to count the same person once. So here's our other assumptions: that the program serves all areas of the community. At the end of the year, there's a small balance. So if we extend the agreement, if we extend the public service agreement to serve people into the next program year, how would that be handled? So let's go ahead and look in the system. How would we do that? Okay, so again, we're going to start. I'm going to skip past, or maybe go a little faster on some of the fields we saw under public facilities, because when I add a new activity here, you're going to see a lot of the same fields that we saw under public improvements in public facilities. Activity owner, that's fine. Program year, I'm going to choose 2011. Project title, you'll see I have a public services project already set up, and we'll call the activity Meals on Wheels. All right. Our activity category, the best choice here is we could probably do, we don't want 03. Remember, 03 is public facilities. We want to come down to 05. And I'm going to say Meals on Wheels is predominantly for seniors. I'm going to choose 05A. Environmental assessment for most of your public services will be exempt. Again, check with your environmental officer. You would want to put in a description here. I'm going to leave it blank for now. If you don't want to see your activity ID right away, you don't actually have to save this page. You can just skip straight to the setup detail. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. National objective, we said we were going to highlight limited clientele, LMC. And based on my matrix code and my national objective, it's saying I have to measure people. It's not giving me any choices here. So let's go ahead and do 2011, and we said 50 seniors. Objective and outcome, let's do suitable living environments and availability, accessibility. Now the address, this is a little tricky because I'm serving the entire area. So where's the benefit of the community going? Okay. Sorry, folks, just a quick note there. All right, so for now, we could put in the address where the meals are prepared, maybe that they also have a congregate meal service. Or, in some cases, you may have to put community-wide as the address. HUD is going to want, as much as possible, some mappable addresses so they can see where the benefit in the community is. But in some cases, the service may be available citywide. I'm going to go ahead and throw in some additional information here, and when I click on validate, it's not going to be able to find this address. So at that point, I click skip validation. Okay. If I scroll down to the next section, the activity purpose, again, all defaults to no, all very good. This one could consider, yes, it does help persons with disabilities if you're serving, homebound elderly. I'm not going to report accomplishments under another activity. I'm going to report accomplishments under this activity. So I leave this question at no. If I scroll down to the next section, all right, for most of your public services, I'm going to assume that they're carried out by a subrecipient. So I'm going to answer, is the activity being carried out by the grantee? I'm going to answer no. And again, you'll watch that this is grayed out, and then this section becomes active. I'm going to go ahead and select an organization. There's a couple different ways to find an organization in the system. Some search hints is just use the city instead of the name. So if I typed in Haverhill, for example, it will give me all the organizations in that city. Another tip I would use is if you do want to put in the organization name, go ahead and just put in like maybe the first word or first few letters, and it will come back with anything that matches that. That way you don't have to put in the exact name. Okay, just for today's purpose, I'm going to borrow this one from Weymouth. And if you can't find your organization here, what you do at that point is click on the Add Organization button. Okay, when you click on Add Organization, it's going to give you a chance to put in the organization name, contact information, and you will need to know the DUNS number at that time. So one thing I've noticed is some grantees are still not collecting that DUNS numbers from their subrecipients. You really have to include that in your Cdbg application nowadays and make sure that you get that DUNS number from those organizations. So in this case, I'm just going to borrow this Meals on Wheels for today's purposes and hit Select. And when I do so, I'm going to use my scroll bar to come down here, and I'll see that name of the organization pop up. And if I chose the wrong one, I can change it or remove that organization. I'm going to go with this one, and anytime I do a subrecipient, I'm going to have this other drop down here, and I'll choose subrecipient only. We talked about target area and during public facility. I'm going to skip past that. I'm going to assume that none of these apply to my public services. So again, when you're doing this for real, you want to read through these, but we saw these under public facility. So for the sake of time, I'm going to skip past those, hit Save and Continue. Okay, scrolling down. Again, these fields are based on my matrix code national objective. These are the questions that I'm going to see for my limited clientele national objective for LMC. Am I presuming a benefit? Am I serving one of those presumed benefit populations that HUD said I can basically skip income verification? And here's a list of those groups again. If I'm serving one of these groups, I can go ahead and answer yes here. There's another interesting Cdbg regulation that says, based on the nature and location of that activity, can you safely assume that at least 51% of the people served, are they going to be low mod? And HUD, if you do this, if you can get HUD to buy off on this, and I would definitely put this past your CPD representative before actually funding the activity, if you can safely assume and they agree that the activity based on its nature and location is going to meet that low mod threshold, then again, you don't have to collect income verification. What you'd want to do is answer yes here, and then I would provide a lot of detail as to how you are basing and what assumptions you are making in terms of making that determination. Again, please check with your CPD representatives first before using this feature. In today's case study, we're going to say no to both. We're going to assume that we're collecting income data. Okay, well actually no, we're serving disabled and seniors, right? So we can do presumed benefit, yes. I'm sorry. Again, please provide funding and leveraged funds. Maybe let's say I'm leveraging some volunteer time. I could go ahead and put in-kind services down here under other funds. Am I providing grants and loans to the beneficiaries, and that's the key word here, to the beneficiaries of this activity? And the answer is no. I'm not giving the seniors I serve any grants or loans. I'm using that money internally for Meals on Wheels, maybe to pay for gas and to pay for food and drivers. So I'm going to leave that section blank. This is only if grants and loans are provided to the beneficiaries of the activity. I'm done, so I can hit Save. There's no need to go back to the previous page, so I hit Save. And hopefully I'll see my activity says Ready to Fund. All right, so I'm ready to fund, and it gives me that shortcut again where I could go ahead and fund this activity. Once I fund the activity, I can do drawdowns, and I really don't have to come back here until I'm ready to update the accomplishments for this activity. Okay. All right, so let's assume that we're at the end of the program year, And again, HUD, when you're reporting accomplishments, a lot of people ask, how often do I have to report accomplishments in IDIS? The minimum requirement is on an annual basis. You want to get the information into the system by the end of the year, or actually before your caper is due, and that way it will be part of your caper. However, HUD does recommend you provide this information on a quarterly basis, and that will do a number of things. Number one, it will help reduce the data entry burden you have at the end of the program year, so you don't have to enter all the data at the end of the year. And it will also help you monitor the progress and the any potential problems with the data that your subrecipients are submitting to you. Okay. So let's assume that we're at the end of the program year. We're going to come back, edit the activity, and click on Add Cdbg Accomplishments. Okay. So first page under Add Accomplishment Detail. First things first, just like under Public Facilities, they want us to specify for what year are we reporting accomplishments. I'm going to say 2011. You can put in a nice narrative according to what your CPD representative wants. I'm not going to put anything in right now. This field, again, proposed units will be filled in once we save the screen. It's blank for now, but once we save the screen, it will be fine. And here we see we need to collect information, race and ethnicity, and income data for the persons we serve. Okay, so let's assume we serve 30 people. Let's say 20 of them were white. Of that population, 16 were also indicated they were of Hispanic or Latino origin. To add another race, I click on Add Another Race by Persons. And I can continue to do that for each race category that I have. Okay. If you, by mistake, add an additional race category, let's say I only serve these three categories and I didn't need this one, I just hit this by mistake. If I leave this at, I think if I just choose any other category and leave it at 0, it'll be fine. It'll erase that. So that's one way around that. So I reported a total of 33 people. Again, Hispanic over here is a subset of this 20, so it's not 33 plus 16, it's just the 33. And so since I'm doing presumed benefit for seniors for a non-center-based activity, I don't have this information. I don't collect this information. I want to use HUD's guidance. So elderly, not center-based, I want to count everybody I serve as low income. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and plug in that 33 here. And when I save this screen, HUD's going to look at this 33, this total here, and this total here. And if they match, it will let you save the screen. If not, it's going to come back with an error and tell you that these have to match. Okay? I'm not done yet, not out of the woods yet. I'm going to go ahead and click on Save and Continue at the bottom of the screen to provide additional accomplishment data. Okay? This screen will change based on the nature of the activity, based on the matrix code and some of the other fields I provided. But in general, it's collecting performance measures. It's saying, of the 33 people that I entered on the previous screen, how would you categorize the benefit they're receiving? Is it new or continuing access to the service? Is it improved access to the service? Or are these folks now receiving a service or benefit that is no longer substandard? Quick note is a lot of grantees out there, they will fund the same program over and over and over again. And that's fine in most cases, I'll say. But if you fund the same program year after year after year, what you can do is consider if it was new, if the service was new the first time you funded it, and it may be a continuing service the second and subsequent years that you funded. So we'll assume that we funded Meals on Wheels last year, so these 33 persons are receiving a continuing access to the same service or benefit they got in the previous year. So just a little, kind of guidance on the wording there. Once I'm done, let's go ahead and click on Save. Now at this point, if I was done with the activity, activity accomplishment data that the activity has realized has been reported in the system, I could go ahead and mark this as complete. In our case study, we said, well, maybe they didn't spend all those dollars. We're going to extend their contract so they can provide a little bit more assistance here. In that case, I would leave that status as open until they've both spent all the money and reported additional accomplishments. Okay? Let's move on. And again, if you have questions about public services, go ahead getting some in. I'm going to go ahead and take a pause to answer those, and once we get done with economic development. So let's talk about economic development real quick. We do have a lot of states on, so and most of the economic development across the country is done by states. So we're going to talk about economic development, and we're going to talk about meeting the low-mod job national objective. So let's start with our eligible uses. You can see most of the eligible uses for economic development are coded as 17 or 18. We also have 14E for commercial facade rehabs. Typically, you want to use 17 when the grantee or a nonprofit is carrying out the activity, and 18 when the funds are going directly to benefit for-profits. Again, there's more guidance and descriptions of these matrix codes in Appendix A of the training manual. Let's talk about the low-mod job national objective. It's the most common for doing economic development. You can use Cdbg to either create new jobs or retain existing jobs that would otherwise be lost without Cdbg assistance. The threshold is at least 51% of those jobs of the full-time equivalents. So if you're doing part-time jobs, you're going to have to make the calculation into full-time equivalents. 51% of the total jobs must be available to or held by low and moderate income folks. Of course, there are some other national objectives that may apply to economic development. For example, if you're doing micro enterprise, you can do limited clientele. If you are providing assistance to a service type business through a commercial facade, for example, you can use area benefit, and in some cases you can use slum blight area or spot. Again, we're going to highlight low-mod jobs just because it's the most common. Quick note, typically as you've seen that the system wants all those numbers to match. The same number of people reported under income has to match the number of people reported under race and ethnicity, for example. This is one case where if you're serving a business that creates part-time jobs, not all of the numbers are going to match. So for example, let's say one activity, one job, or one business creates one full-time job and two part-time jobs, each at 20 hours per week. What you're going to report under race and income are 3 persons assisted, but when you report the jobs, you're going to see that those 3 persons, since 2 of them were part-time, they only equate to 2 full-time equivalents. So if we have 3 jobs created and they're taken by Alice, Bill, and Cindy, Alice is a full-time, Bill and Cindy are both half-time. Those 3 persons, it's okay if those 3 persons does not match that full-time equivalent anytime you're dealing with part-time. The important thing to note is that the low-mod job calculation, the 51% threshold, is based on this number here, this 2, and not this 3. So let's say Bill and Cindy are both low-mod and Alice is not low-mod. If you think about that, you're really only at 50%, and you're right there. You're knocking on the door, but you're not meeting that 51% threshold. So we'll see that as we walk through the example. In terms of additional documentation, when entering the data into IDIS, you need to show how the jobs were made available to or held by low-mod. Of course, that information is not into IDIS, but that should be in the project file. When entering data into IDIS, though, you only want to count the first hire for each job. So, going back to that example, let's say, Alice is hired as the manager, so we would use her data. Even if she's fired in 3 weeks and they hire somebody else, we would use Alice's data to enter into IDIS. You want to track jobs as long as the jobs are still being created and the company is hiring those new positions. So what we've seen across the country is, economic development, especially in this market, it takes a while to maybe create and fill these jobs. So don't just put an arbitrary deadline on the business. You don't want to close out the activity after a year, for example, if they haven't created all those jobs. You would leave that activity open and report on the jobs as they come in and those jobs are being created. Again, it's not defined in the regulations, but if you think they're still out there creating jobs or trying to fill these positions, go ahead and leave that activity open and just report on the narrative. In terms of documenting job retention, you need to show in the project file, not necessarily in IDIS, how those jobs would be lost without this additional infusion of Cdbg resources. Some key points for economic development. When you are running an economic development program where you are giving out loans or grants to for-profit entities, what you need to do is set up a separate IDIS activity for each business that receives assistance. So again, if you have a program and you give out 10 loans over the course of a program year, you would have 10 separate IDIS activities, one for each loan. Okay. There are some cases where you can aggregate. Maybe you're doing a business incubator or you're putting in some infrastructure for a new business park. In those cases, you can aggregate. But again, take a close look at the different LMJ national objectives, and they'll give you some flexibility there. Typically, you're going to create a separate activity for each business assistant. Make sure you report jobs in the correct program year. So if you funded the business and gave them the loan in 2010, but they didn't create the jobs until 2012, when you're reporting on that accomplishment field, make sure that those jobs are put in the 2012 accomplishment year. Report jobs only once each program year. So if you have a separate program delivery activity, make sure you use that flag that the accomplishments for the program delivery activity will be reported under another activity. And report only the number of jobs created or retained. So some grantees out there were mistakenly reporting the entire loan mod population of the location of the business or of the jurisdiction. Don't do that, because that's going to really skew the numbers the wrong way. And finally, what we've been talking about today is not Cdbg-R. You have to calculate the number of jobs created by Cdbg-R, but that calculation is entirely different. So if you're having problems with that, you want to talk to your CPD representative. Okay, so in today's exercise, we're going to actually go ahead and set up a new loan for Thompson Automotive. They promised to create one new job, and we're going to report on, well, actually, we'll probably just have enough time for that, but we want to create it. We'll do this. We'll create an activity to represent a new loan, and then we'll go back and update that loan to report the creation of jobs. How are we doing on time? We still have about 15 minutes, so let's go ahead and do that. Let's add an activity. Again, if it's not in the system, we have to add it. First things first, choose a program year, 2011, and we'll choose economic development as our project. It's always good to have a naming convention when naming your loans, especially, or your activities, I should say, especially if you have a lot of different people entering data into IDIS. We decided 18A is our best national matrix code, I should say. Environmental assessment, also it's complete. Again, you'll want to put in a nice full description. And let's finish our setup. Our national objective will be LMJ. You can see I'm limited to my accomplishment type. I have to measure jobs. And again, in some cases, let's say, well, maybe I think 3 jobs will come through in 2011. The system gives me an opportunity to spread out these accomplishments over multiple years. I had a good question from one of our attendees yesterday who said, well, maybe we thought that there was going to be 3 in 2011 and 2 in 2012, but it ended up that all 5 of them are going to be in 2012. Do I have to come back and edit this information? And the answer is no. These are just proposed counts. I wouldn't come back and edit this. I wouldn't take the time to come back and edit this. I would just provide an explanation in the narrative, in the accomplishment narrative, as to why you're behind schedule and what's happening with that specific project. Scrolling down, let's do objective and outcome. Those look good. I'm helping a specific business, so I could put in the address of that business. And validate this address. I think this address does validate, so you can actually get a sense of what it looks like when it does. You can see all this additional information it provides. Gives you the FIPS code, gives you a link to some census information for this address, and for Google Maps. So we have just a second. Let's see if it. Nope. Oh, there it is. So you can actually see down here. It actually mapped out that address. So a pretty neat feature built right into IDIS. Okay, so let's continue on. Again, none of these are going to apply. Will accomplishments be reported under another activity? No, I'm going to report all my accomplishments for this loan under this activity. We'll say, yes, the grantee is carrying out this project, or activity rather, I'm sorry. I shouldn't say project, I should say activity. Let's say it's not in the target area. These don't apply. You can see that favorite activity is finally highlighted because this is now economic development activity. Excuse me. I've been talking too much. Okay, so none of these are going to apply. We're going to hit save and continue. Basically, we've seen all these screens, or all these fields before. What's new for low-mod jobs is it's going to ask, I can put in my loan information here. For deferred payment loan, I'm going to assume it's deferred at maybe 0 interest for 5 years. Notice that they're asking for months here, so I'm going to put in 60 months for 5 years, and maybe it was $50,000. And it will ask for how many jobs are expected to be created, how many are expected to be retained by this activity. The key thing to note here is if you look at my 2 full-time columns, both full-time and full-time low-mod, they want me to count the number of jobs. However, I also have 2 columns over here for part-time and part-time low-mod, where I'm counting the number of total weekly hours, okay? So let's assume I'm creating 5 jobs, 3 full-time, and we'll assume that maybe, let's say, 2 of those are expected to be held by low-mod, and part-time. Let's say we're doing 2 part-time jobs at 20 hours per week. So 2 times 20, I need to put in the number of hours here, okay? So just keep that in mind, that if you're doing part-time, it's asking for weekly hours. If you're doing full-time, it's asking for the total number of jobs. I'm now done with setup. I hit save. All right, so I come back to my first screen. I know I'm good if it says ready to fund is yes. That way I know I've provided enough setup data to move forward. Again, all I did was answer all the required fields. There's some fields I left blank, like that leveraged funds field. That is a very good field to fill out. If you have that information, please provide it, even though it's not required. Okay, so let's flash forward to the end of the year, and I need to add accomplishments for this activity. I'm going to assume that 3 of those jobs were created in the first year. Let's go to Add Accomplishments for 2011. Whoops, a little too far in the future there. I'll say 3 jobs were created. Again, I'm being very brief here. You would want to provide more data based on your conversations with your CPD reps. I'll add some additional races. And my income levels. Keep in mind that when you're reporting on income levels for people who just got a new job, you qualify them based on the income before they got the job, okay? So, you know, if they get a job and it pushes them out of the low income range, that's awesome, that's great, that's what we want to do, right? But in IDIS, we're reporting on the number of people who we're actually reporting on the income before they took the job. Okay, so I'm going to assume all 3 were low income or extremely low. And again, I see the same box here that I saw during setup. How many total job count and how many for part-time, what's my weekly hour count. Okay, so I'm going to assume that maybe one of the jobs was full-time. And, well, actually, let's change this. Let's do this. Let's do 2 of the people were extremely low, and 1 was non-low moderate. Okay? So you can see that according to this calculation, I'm still above that 51%. I'm at 66%. Let's say, however, that full-time job was not taken by the low mod person, taken by someone who was over income, but the 2 part-time jobs were taken by low and moderate persons. So when I do that calculation, you can see I'm only coming out to 50%. And this is what the national objective is based on, not this number up here. So keep that in mind, is this is the key factor in determining national objective compliance. You can also see that the system calculated the full-time equivalents. So these 2 part-time jobs, together equated to 1 full-time job. And that's how the system comes up with those 2 full-time jobs. Let's go ahead and hit save and continue. We'll see some additional performance measures. Total hours for full-time low mod must be answered. You do have to put in zeros. Which field is that? Full-time low mod. Okay, so I got a 0 there. Let's see if it likes that. Nope. I might actually have to put in zeros across here as well. Nope, it's not liking it. So we might have to check in. That might be a bug in the system if that is not allowed to be 0. There, I liked it that time. So we have some extra performance measures here. So of the jobs that we created and reported on the previous screen, how many are going to receive employee-sponsored health care benefits? You would report that right here. And how many of the persons served were unemployed prior to taking that job? So I would put that here. That's for the created jobs. This is for retained jobs. We created jobs, so I can ignore this. The next section is they want me to categorize the jobs. So how many were officials or managers, how many were professional, how many technicians. And these, if you need a description of these are all described in one of the appendices. It might be I or J of the training manual. So if you have a hard time, or the businesses you're assisting have a hard time categorizing the jobs you're creating, go ahead and look at the appendix of the training manual. I'm going to go ahead and assume that all 3 of them were technicians. Of the businesses assisted, how many were brand new and how many were existing businesses? I'm going to say 1 existing business, and it was able to expand based on the assistance. We also have how many, they want you to count how many were relocating from one facility to the next. How many of the businesses used funds to rehab, and how many of the businesses provide goods or services that meet the needs of the service area? This is an automotive shop, so I'm going to say 1 to this. And right here, HUD wants you to calculate, or go ahead and provide the DUNS number for each business assisted. This is a required field. So there has been a lot of pushback by businesses receiving economic development loans from Cdbg that they don't want to pay for a DUNS number. And you don't actually have to pay for the DUNS number. If you are a federal grant recipient, you are able to apply for a free DUNS number. So none of the businesses that you assist should have to actually pay for the DUNS number. Make sure you get that as part of the application process. If you need to know where to go to get that free DUNS number, go ahead and submit a question, and we can go ahead and maybe provide that link as part of the FAQ. Let's go ahead and save. And we're done with reporting accomplishments for that 2011 program year. Let's assume that this activity did not create all of the jobs, so we wouldn't complete it. We would leave this activity open until the next program year. And let's go ahead and assume that they created some more jobs in the next program year. So if we go back to Edit Cdbg Accomplishments, and again, we don't want to go ahead and change any of the data for 2011. 2011 is done and over with. We want to add a new accomplishment year, and we would go through those same screens for 2012. 2 more jobs created, I'm just going to put in some very quick information because I want to show you one more feature. Whoops, what did I do? I missed something. Here we go. So once I have multiple years, there's a couple features I want to just point out real quick. If I go back to Edit Accomplishments, that 2011 data, it's going to default to the most recent year, which in this case is 2012. That 2011 data is still there. If I ever want to drill down and take a look at that specific data, I can use this feature right here, the Select Another Year, to go back and look at previous data. Okay? And then if I want to look at both data for 2011 and 2012, I have this feature over here called View Total Years. So if I click on that, it's going to give me a total for race and ethnicity. It will give me a total for income. It will give me a total down here at the bottom. So showing me my percent and actual full-time jobs created. Okay? So that's it for reporting accomplishments for economic development. Let's go ahead and do a final few slides. In summary, some of the important steps to get off on the right foot are to define the scope correctly. Make sure that you understand what that IDIS activity is representing. Make sure you choose the most appropriate matrix code and national objective, especially for public services and public facilities. Don't rely on 03 and 05. Use, 05A, 05B, those more specific matrix codes. In terms of reporting accomplishments, report annually at a minimum, at a bare minimum. Get the information in there in time for your CAPER or for states for your PER. Report by program year. So those programs, those projects and activities that last more than one program year, make sure when you are reporting accomplishments, you're reporting in the correct year. One thing to note is that HUD really only concentrates on the most recent year. So if you had a 2006 activity, and you didn't report accomplishments until now, and you go back and throw them in 2006, you're never going to get credit for it, and HUD's never going to get credit for it. You should be reporting in the most current year. And finally, make sure that your paper trail and your documentation system, it's adequate to capture all of those performance measurements. Again, the three keys we want in terms of reporting accomplishments are we want the data to be accurate, we want it to be complete, and we want it to be timely. And wrapping up, there's some additional training materials. Again, on that ComCon website, you can get a copy of all of the materials from the 2-day training. You can get copies and review this video or the other webinars if you missed those on that ComCon website. And we're also going to have that really nice, long, detailed video, or I should say video modules in terms of the entire 2-day training. There's some mapping tools webinars at this link, and again, this is where we're going to have the training webinars. We do have a couple questions. Let me try to raise those before we end on time. We got 2 more minutes. All right, let's see. Question 1, would it be more suitable to code rehab of a senior center, a public facility located in a low-income area due to the location, or LMC? That's a very good question. So I'm doing a senior center. I'm rehabbing a senior center. Which national objective should I use? Should I use low-mod income area or limited clientele? Now, remember, if we go back to our slides and I look at my slide for low-mod area, you're going to see that for low-mod area, and again, you're going to look at the regulations as well. The activity must benefit all residents of the area. So if you were saying that the senior center is really only going to benefit the seniors in that area, you would probably want to use limited clientele because not everybody in that area is going to benefit. Okay, so very good question. And this is the type of thought process that you want to do ahead of time to make sure that all your activities are eligible and meet that national objective. We have a second question here. When trying to validate and address, this feature is not the greatest for public facilities because it will not validate entire blocks at a time. You're right. Oh, hi, Lisa. It's Lisa from Madison County. Hi, Lisa. Very good question. At this point, the only workaround right now is just to bypass the validation. Perhaps later in the future, HUD will be able to validate those types of addresses, but it's just not happening at this time. So good question. At this point, all we have to do is provide exactly what you're doing. Go ahead and put in 1700 block of Main Street, for example, and the people reading that, the humans reading that will be able to say, oh, I know exactly where that is. But in terms of, geocoding in that and getting the system to read that, that's somewhere in the future. All right. So next question, are you talking activity numbers or projects? Please clarify is which. Yeah, I'm sorry. There was a couple times where I was interchanging the word projects and activities. When I meant to really focus on activities today. We really didn't talk about projects at all. So everything today, we were focusing in on activities. So I apologize for that. All right, again, another good question here. Would an ADA curb ramp installation in a low-mod area be coded as low-mod area or limited clientele? If both are applicable, which code would HUD prefer grantees to use? In that case, if the primary purpose of the ADA curb ramp installation was for persons with disabilities, I would go ahead and use limited clientele. And a note from HUD here, from HUD says it must be LMC, limited clientele. So when you're doing curb cuts, use LMC. How is the tip function used, or what is its purpose? Very good question. If you look at a lot of these fields in IDIS, I'm going to jump back here real quick. And I'm sorry we're going over a little long. I just want to do one or two more. This will be the last question. Let me see. Here's a tip. If I rest my mouse over that tip, you can see that a little box comes up. And I hope you can see that through the webinar. Sometimes things don't show up in the webinars. But it will give you a short little description of what it is. In my experience, I haven't found the tips too extremely helpful. Most of the times, you're going to want to look at the information in the training manual, and that will give you more guidance. So, folks, I really want to thank you for joining us today. I don't have any more time. I ran a little bit over, actually. Just a few more things here. Just want to remind you about the webinars tomorrow, not tomorrow, but next week, Wednesday and Thursday. We did have one yesterday, and we'll have a copy of that one and this one up on that ComCon website soon. You will see an online evaluation will be sent to you automatically within about 1 hour. So please take a moment, because we do value your feedback. It's really weird doing these webinars because I get absolutely zero feedback during the training, and so it's good to know if you liked them, what you didn't like, and how we can improve them. So again, thank you for attending and taking the time to attend today, and we are done for the day. So thank you very much.